Okay, so I'll start. So hi everybody, I'm Lamia. I'm a yoga instructor, life coach, Akashic record reader, healer. I mean, I wear many hats. And today I'm with Manmeet from the Heart Collective, and we're going to be discussing all things positivity, spirituality, growth, expansion, and everything else that people are experiencing um, in their spiritual lives, personal lives, and on account of this wonderfully tricky year, 2020.
Thank you for being here, Lamia. Can you tell us a little bit about how did you find yourself in the space of being a yoga teacher, a coach, a healer? How did this happen for you?
So, to be very honest, when I was a young person too, I had a strong inclination to this stuff. Except that my environment and the people in my life, um, sorry, I didn't hit start with the video. So I'm going to go ahead with that. Can you ask me the question again? The intro won't be there, but I'll re-record it.
That's fine. Yeah, no worries. Yeah, so what I asked you was if you can tell us how did you make it here? How did this happen for you? Being a yoga teacher, an intuitive coach, a healer, how did you find your way here?
So when I was really young, I had a strong inclination towards this stuff. I was born in a Muslim family and obsessed with Ganesh and Hanuman, which my parents couldn't even understand because my mom's a Sardarni and my dad's a Muslim, and there's none of this stuff. And I had this desire to go barefoot to Vaishno Devi and all this weird stuff. So I was always that kid who loved rituals, loved pujas, mantras used to just, give me this feeling. And it was odd because nobody in my family had any of that influence. And then when I went to college, I was in Australia. And just out of feeling, um, I would say not homesick, but looking for some kind of physical activity because I used to be a runner and swimmer before that. And Melbourne was far too cold for those activities. I found myself in a yoga studio. And I think it was destiny for me because the Iyengar, the original Iyengar affiliated studio was like literally 5 doors down from my house. So I didn't have to even like look for it. And in those warm studios, I kind of started to find my breath. I, for the first time, could relax. I loved Shavasana. I didn't fall in love with the Iyengar practice immediately because I am a very Vata, excitable kind of energy. And so Vinyasa classes always pulled me in. And in Australia, the Vinyasa classes again had lots of mantra music. And I would just find myself like taking my phone on record mode, voice note mode, and like recording which song so I could come back and Shazam it and find that track. Because music was always the undercurrent, like mantras was always the undercurrent of sort of my personal experience. And that was just me practicing yoga. And then I had the death of one of my best friends who drowned. And at that point, the yoga mat was like my saving grace. It was my place where I was going to grieve. I was only 18 years old and I was away from my family. I didn't know how to grieve. And at that point, I had started to meet clairvoyants and channels, and I knew that there was more to life than someone just dying and their relationship with you being over. And I think that's when all of this started. And shortly after, I was convinced that I wanted to teach. So I waited to graduate. I had a regular job, and then I started to study to be a yoga teacher. Also in Australia. At that point, I was doing more Iyengar yoga because I realized that too much movement was not suiting me. I was always drawn to it, but it would leave me more spacey. And I had no idea about Ayurveda at the time and about Vata, Pitta, Kapha. And I was noticing this. So the Iyengar studios, the Iyengar practice was so suited to me. And then I came to India and I met Maud, who had the yoga house. And she had already started the studio, which was looking for an Indian partner. And that's how I started on the journey of being in this space professionally. So that's just the journey in short, although it's a long version. And from there, of course, Reiki. And when I studied Reiki, it was like instant, for me to feel the energy in my palms, to feel my third eye was quite natural. Although I think that I still hadn't completely understood the whole, from my own personal perspective, the whole value of really slowing down because that's the time when yoga kind of made its entry in a big way into Bombay City. And people wanted to do Ashtanga Vinyasa, they wanted to do Vinyasa flow practices, they wanted to sweat. And I wanted to give, out of being a studio owner, give clients what they needed, even though it was under the umbrella of traditional yoga. And soon I realized that the practices that suited me most, made me the happiest, most balanced, was always the hatha practices. So went off, studied in Shivananda. I always loved the inversions. If you do any Iyengar practice, you know that inversions are like a big part of their practice. And so my practice kept changing, and the students who came to my class kept changing as my energy changed. And I find myself giving Reiki to people in Shavasana and chatting with them after class and starting to form these connections of the psychosomatic nature of our body and our emotions. People would come to me with knee pain, and they would just be the kind of people who would, uh, for lack of a better word, be quite inflexible. So if they have a certain place they put their mat and someone came there, they would be not happy. They would ask to swap, or they would show up extremely early to put their mat there. And there was this kind of thigh painness and knee pain, and fire element and pitta energy. And I then suffered eczema very seriously, which is a vata disorder, and no dermat could help me. That's the point at which I found homeopathy and Ayurveda and studied Ayurveda. And I can tell you now that I have no eczema. It's completely controlled, it doesn't get irritated. But also, my practice is different. And I always had this voice in those times when I was teaching yoga where I felt like, I was getting a bit sick of people just coming to the mat from a fitness perspective, from a achievement perspective of wanting to come into this pose, of being able to achieve that. And I knew that, after class, when the guard of like what I can achieve was dropped, everybody was able to be vulnerable, had that ability to share what's going on in their life, to talk about the fact that they couldn't sleep well, they had anxiety, they were going through breakups. And that's the stuff I love the most. So really my work started with then doing meditations and then doing Reiki healings, which kind of just pushed me into doing more coaching. And I was always doing angel card readings, but not again professionally, just for the class. I would keep cards and I would do a reading for people after classes. And when Yoga House and running Yoga House started to not feel like that was what I wanted to do anymore, I started to see clients. And honestly, for me, the moment I thought that I want to do this, I want to be a coach, um, things started to appear. Like my friend who's a therapist sent me my first official client because that girl needed to meditate. And obviously, from there, we started looking at patterns. And I took my first clients in my father's lunch area only after 6 p.m. because otherwise the space was used. And from there, it kind of just moved seamlessly. And I started to realize when I was doing card readings or when I was in the sessions, that I would just for 5 minutes before a client came in, like just ground myself, maybe use some Reiki to, connect to myself, to connect to higher guidance. And I started to figure out pretty soon that something greater than me was working through me. Um, and from there, as they say, it's history. And I get to challenge doctors regularly. I get to challenge people's belief systems regularly because um, I have figured out, and I'm still human, so I can't say I'm always winning at the game, but I figured out that we are so much more than what we see ourselves to be, you know, um, in the sense that we don't even realize how powerful we are as beings. And that's really what I help people tap into. So I used to call them empowerment. I still call them emotional empowerment sessions because I believe that everything is stemming from that emotional space, and the emotional space takes you to places where the trauma is stored, belief systems, and then once you've got to that root, everything can be released and kind of unknotted, and then you can step into a better version of yourself, hopefully the best version of yourself.
Absolutely. I was telling you earlier a little bit, and I thought I have to bring it up in the session that when you talk about how powerful we are, I experienced a little bit of that when I know I did a similar manifestation, one with you and one was with Chetna. I don't know if you know Chetna or
I know,
know of
Chetan.
her. Yeah, right. So yours was a session through a meditation, and then it was like a lot of journaling, and then you guided us with different ways on how to, put down your affirmation, right? I choose this, I am doing this, I am being this. And we wrote about, and I remember writing about how I'm going, traveling to Goa for work and for fun. And I remember you saying, make sure you write fun, because I forgot to write fun and I went out of the city and I was only working. So, and within 1 month after that, I went to Goa and and I picked up a project there. I'm an interior designer, so I picked up a project there, and it was a really fun trip. So that happened. This is something which was not coinciding with the one I did with Chetna, but the common one was that with her, it was a visual which I sketched, and with you, I wrote about how I'm living outside the city with my husband and my dog. And now we've just bought a house in Goa and we're moving there. So, please expand more on the power part of it, because I've experienced it. And ever since that happened, I told Saibad, I was like, I'm going to ask Lamia at some point if we can speak with her, because there is something there, like I know I manifested it, but she held the space, and, they helped me channel it. So yeah, would you want to tell us?
I won't take any credit for your manifestation, because truly you manifested. I'm just sharing tools that I found that have worked for me. So sketching is amazing. And I think because you're an interior designer, you have the ability to draw really well. I'm a writer by nature. And so for me, journaling was like something that I just fell into and I loved. And I never read what I journal. It's just this cathartic experience of putting pen to paper. Because if you understand, like we healers who work with our hands, it's connected to our hearts, essentially, right? So what you are putting into the heart, which is essentially the most potent place energetically in our bodies, in our physical bodies, it travels out of the heart into your hands, and then you write it down. And the moment it's written, it becomes already, it's in the physical realm of existence. It's third dimensional, it's on a paper, it's pen, it's words. And so you've already created it at that point. The tough part is for people to write it down and then also own it, and we're often talking about what I want. I mean, I'm also like, I'd like this, I would like to do this. I'm always evolving, even my own practice, my own life. But I have started to really become mindful of like, I am in this space. Because when we don't like something, we're always like, I am like this. I'm just not disciplined. I'm just always late. We always do that in I am. But when we want something to aspire to, we're quick to just be like, I wish I could be like that, and I think the way we speak and how we engage with the universe around us constantly is something that we don't even recognize. And coming back to Ayurveda, because it's something that I'm so inspired by, some people are just predisposed to more negative thinking. It can be nature versus nurture. Nature meaning what your Ayurvedic constituency is. So if you are airy like me, you're connected to the sky constantly, which means that air element is working through you. Now, air element in our body is responsible for the nervous system. And when your nervous system is not in check, anxiety, fearfulness can crop up. That's on the nature side of things. Now, if you look at Ayurveda from a fiery perspective, people who are like, they're the people who have a goal, stick to it, but then burn themselves off along the process of doing it, because that fire is just burning through them, right? And then there are the earth people who are the grounded ones, but who just don't ever manifest anything because they're just so content. They just can hibernate all day. They don't have that drive. So really, you need all the 5 elements in the right balance. And that's how we are created, because we are no different from earth. So that's on the nature front of things. On the nurture front of things, it's your family. How your parents were programmed. What was their relationship with money? What was their relationship with their parents? What was their relationship to their body? What was their relationship to hard work? And then a combination of this is how we set up the world around us. And even when you're aware of these things, you start to still fall trap into not being able to manifest because most of the times people are like, I don't know what I want. I want that because that person has it, or it sounds cool. Like when young girls come to me and they're like, I want to get married. I'm like, no, you don't want to get married. Somebody else wants you to be married. Like, do you even know what kind of partner do you want? And that's how the journey begins, because things seem good, to people on the outside. They look at someone else's experience and they want to have that. And we are constantly manifesting that which we don't want. I tell people this all the time. There's so many times I'm like, I hope I'm not going to be late and you're late. Or, I hope, my, uh, this happens, or I get that payment, and you're saying it from a negative perspective, and it happens because we are constantly interacting with the universe. And I read this in one of Louise Hay's books, and she said that we live in a yes universe. So, like, whether you say I don't want this or I want this, it's going to be like yes. So you rather just focus on I want this, and be more and more clear about what you want. And when I do the sessions week on week with people, and we have like one new moon, one full moon, and two other sessions, I encourage people to keep refining their intentions as they discover more about themselves. So I was someone who knew early on, like I didn't want to like a 9 to 5 job. I was never cut out for a desk job. I would always be in arts fields or film and production. But I also didn't realize that there's also going to be like 2 a.m.s, you know. So I had to figure that out and experience it. So when people are like, I manifested this, but this part is not good, I'm like, that's great. That means you are, one, learning about yourself, two, learning to work with the universe and refining what it is you want to manifest. So just to go one step further with you, now you're on Goa with your dog and your husband, and you can also say that I am living a life in which I'm working only 4 days a week. So you can actually enjoy the other 2 days, and of course one day for rest. Um, so um, I feel like refining that is the most important thing. And also, we are natural creators. So there's nothing out of the ordinary that you tap into. You just can't step out of your own way, essentially, out of your own fears. You learn to put them at bay or to process them, realize that your fears are speaking and it's not actually you. And that's how you manifest more simply. I mean, I had this happen to me today with you, where I was at lunch with my mother-in-law and my sister-in-law. And my sister-in-law is in town, and she was talking to me about my Instagram. And I was telling her, I really struggle with editing because I don't have time or patience. And you have to keep watching the entire video again and again. And I came home and I called you up, and you told me that you have a really great editor. The universe is constantly working for us. And if you feel like it's not, it's perhaps because there's something more that needs to be revealed to you, or you're maybe not looking in the right direction.
Yeah, I would totally agree. The universe is constantly working for us, and I've only learned it so late in life. And I was just like, why didn't I realize this 5 years ago?
Or when we were 5 years old, life would
Yeah,
be so much simpler.
exactly. Right. So you mentioned about mantras being always a big part of life for you from like beginning. So a really quick question here. What is your favorite mantra?
The Hanuman Chalisa.
Okay, wow. That's a long one.
It's a long one, and I actually like use it before my meditation every morning. Either listen to it or chant it. So there are 4 paths to yoga which people don't talk about again. There's your karma yoga. There's the Raj yoga, which is all the activity related yoga, which is your asana, pranayam. There's Jnana, which is the study of the scriptures. And then there's Bhakti yoga. And I found Bhakti yoga myself 5 years into my practice. And I was like, this is all I want to do. I just want to dance and be in this state of devotion and just, feel this like overpouring of love for me, which is what I find that the mantras do for you. Such a simple practice, so easy to do, and yet people are not tapping into that. I feel so sad about it. That's why music is a big part of my sessions. I don't always use mantras because they can also stimulate, and in meditation we just want music to kind of take you in, but not then focus on words and things like that. But I truly believe that these 4 paths to yoga are essentially the 4 ways that you can come into that inner union with yourself, as the word yoga means. And for me, Bhakti yoga is like that place where it just happens. Like I'm just in like another bliss state, like literally I feel like I'm not in my body, or I'm really deep in. It's just wonderful. And there are not enough bhakti events here, but the Westerners have taken it so seriously with what they call kirtan. It's just wonderful, wonderful. I mean, I think Kundalini yoga has imbibed it a lot. So if you do Kundalini yoga practices, there's a lot of music, a lot of mantra practice. Also, mantra is potent because when you chant, you are breathing, essentially. And at the pace at which you chant, so if suppose you do an Om Namah Shivaya, you start with Om Namah Shivaya, and then you go longer, Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya, and then Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya. Your breath changes with it. And that's how you're creating some kind of feeling state within and tapping into yourself just with the breath. Also, mantras have their own vibration because sound is vibration. So once again, you step into another layer out of the physicality. So you can understand that when I was doing all of this stuff, like just the up dog, down dog was like enough, enough of that. The yoga practice is a wonderful, wonderful place. But yeah, I think that Bhakti Yoga and what we essentially do now in my sessions is Jnana Yoga, because we don't study scriptures per se, but we study moon cycles, we study the universe. It's all Jnana Yoga.
I want to get deeper into that. Did you say Dhyan Yoga?
Nyan. So they
Dhyan.
from the perspective of education, like study.
Okay. So I want to get deeper into that. But before that, I have one question regarding the mantras is, so does that make you or us, or, religious? Like, because if we are choosing to be spiritual, I mean, I want a clarification here. It's a very, I would say, a random question that just popped up in my head, that if I want to not follow a particular religion, but I feel the benefit of mantras, does that make me religious?
No, in my opinion, not at all, because I'm not necessarily religious. And also, I think that personally, for me, it was like a very natural space. But if you just listen to mantras, you will sense how your energy changes. You become softer, you're more in the present. And can I tell you how I actually fell in love with the Hanuman Chalisa? I had had a breakup. I was young, I was in my sort of early 20s. And I had kind of the relationship had run its course even when I was in it, but I didn't have the courage to exit. And in the mornings, I would do my practice, my yoga asana practice, sometimes with music, sometimes without music. And then I would kind of set the tone while I was planning for the class and putting I would have like a structure for the class and I would write that down before every class. I would play the music. And when I ended this relationship, I was expecting to be heartbroken. But every morning I would wake up and play the Hanuman Chalisa. And like 10 days later, I was like, oh my God, I haven't hit that low. Like wondering when it's going to come, where I just feel like a complete loss of like, I'm going to be alone. It never came because the Hanuman Chalisa is such a strong mantra from a perspective of strength that it just never came, And I realized that there was definitely something more powerful than just me enjoying it. Because I've always been someone who likes music. My entry into it was a very feeling space. Later, I realized the benefit of it. When you read even the words of the Hanuman Chalisa, most of the mantras, they make so much sense. There's so much. The Hanuman Chalisa is talking constantly about not only attacks from like yourself, your thoughts, but psychic attacks also, because they have a verse about that. So that because mantras are so ancient, and I think we today, yes, have a certain amount of evolution that's happening on earth between beings on earth. But I think there was a lot more knowledge that got lost or became ritualistic. And so the potency of it got lost as the years went on. But if you understand Hanuman also, why his energy is like that is because he was constantly devoted to Ram. But Ram is not the God, the man Ram, but Ram essentially stands for infinite consciousness. So you're basically in complete surrender and devotion of source. But in that time and age, people didn't understand it in that way, or maybe they did and they just had myths as a way of explaining it. But when you try and understand them, you'll be blown at how relevant it is to today. I mean, I know people, go to Gita classes and they do this stuff because it's still extremely, extremely relevant. And not only that, if you look at even some of the Catholic songs, right? Or if you even look at Buddhist mantras or the Sikh, basically the Kundalini practices, they all essentially, if you understand the meaning of them, like for me, when I used to find mantras, I wanted to learn them. Like now I'm like trying to be more in the moment and not try to mark them up. But the Guru mantra is my go-to when I'm practicing, when I'm like because it's a short one, and you call in like Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva, and you essentially awaken the guru within you. So it's already telling you that you're no different from these gods, right? You're just calling forth that energy within you. So mantra practice is so powerful. And what I love about the Westerners, and one of the things they did with yoga is that they actually made mantras really cool sounding. So you can actually play them with like most of my friends listen to Krishna Das now in the mornings or when they can't sleep at night. And I had introduced this to them like, on a trip away or a night out, like at the end of the night. So there's no
Please, the name, sorry.
Krishna
The
Das.
name?
Krishna Das. He's one of my favorites.
Krishna Das.
Yeah, he's one of my favorites, but there's many, but he's my go-to. And the wonderful thing about Spotify and SoundCloud is like once you like this kind of music, they keep directing more of that to you. So I'm finding new artists like daily, and they just make it so fun because they have instruments. Maybe the pronunciation's a little off, and some people are a bit snooty about that. But I think it's really the bhav behind it. The emotion comes through. Like Krishnadas is not even a trained singer. So his story is fantastic. He came to India, and he went to Vrindavan. His guru was in Vrindavan. And Vrindavan is like the Krishna capital, the Bhakti Yoga capital in India. And his guru came to him once. And I mean, part of their sadhana was to sit in the kirtan and sing and pick up an instrument and contribute to the music that's being created. That was their sadhana. And his guru came to him and told him that you've got to go back to the States. And he's like, no, I've decided to live here forever. He's like, no, you have to go back. You have unfinished work there. So he goes back, and 3 months later, his guru left his body, passed on. And he was so upset that, he decided that he would never sing and chant again. But then when he was ready and he had finished grieving, he went back to it. And today he's one of the pioneers of this field and this work. And he's called Kirtanwala, and he has like concerts, and it's like a whole community, which so lacking here. I mean, Art of Living community has the kirtan practices. But I also did a yoga training in Bali, and like, fantastic. Like, we need that in Bombay. We need a community for people to just come and dance to devotional music, like that is appealing to young people.
I agree, Lamia. Why? I mean, I hope if nobody else, you should start that.
We used to do that at Yoga House, but it's hard to find musicians there to work with each other who all know, the tunes. Like, I mean, someday I'll get to that too.
Yeah, no, because I'm also recently finding mantras, and somehow in the the Kirtan Sardarni, but I've always been very anti-religion. And then I found this kind of path into spirituality, and now suddenly I'm really liking, Niranjan Kaur and Sanatan Kaur and Nirgun Kaur, because it's so westernized, right? The same words are just said in really simple westernized way, and suddenly it's appealing, and I'm just like, am I becoming religious again? So hence my previous question.
Definitely not becoming religious.
Right, yeah. So yeah, it's interesting how you just keep evolving, yeah.
What also happens when we start practicing any form of yoga, whether it's meditation, whether it's pranayam, whether it's actual asana, or whether it's even doing, the kriyas from Kundalini Yoga, is that you start to become more sensitive. And that sensitivity that opens you up. I mean, it was in a yoga class in Shavasana, listening to a mantra in Melbourne, that I felt happy tears for the first time, because you are so flooded with love, the vibration of love. And love is so misunderstood because it's an emotion, it's a romantic emotion. But the vibration of love, when that awakens in you, you tear up, because it's so pure and so like overcoming and overwhelming in a positive way. So what you're finding is that you're just like increasing in sensitivity. And so mantras that have their own vibration are now tuning things in you. I mean, even in chakras, there are the sounds, right? The lam, the vam, the ram, which are all vibrations of the chakra. So of each of the chakras. So when you have it in music, it definitely, I think, hits a chord in. I mean, people feel this about music in any case, that certain music is felt in your stomach. Some music is felt in your heart, Some music you feel in your shoulders. You can find where you can locate the vibration in your body. Same way, the mantras have a much deeper, um, a way to like kind of infiltrate you much deeper and take you to this place of bliss. I love it.
Yeah, I'm loving how you're just sharing such interesting perspectives. Okay, that's great. I
Thank you.
want to, yeah, no, such a pleasure. So, before we get into the Jnana Yoga, I wanted to ask you, how did you first find your first clairvoyance? How did it happen? How did you like tap it? How did you realize this is it? So that, I mean, we can find it too, hopefully.
So I'm actually not clairvoyant entirely. I'm more clair audio. That's why I think the like for music, and because it starts for me like when I was a kid as well, I couldn't read and study. I used to walk and study. I was like a vata active, hyperactive child. And my dad figured out that I best learn by being told, read to, and then you repeat back to me. Because for me, that was the strongest place. So, I didn't actually try to become clear audio. I thought I would never channel. I was quite freaked out by the idea of channeling, to be very honest with you. Because when I was in college and I was in Melbourne and I had that and faced the loss of my friend, and I went to channels and clairvoyance, I obviously went into the bookstore, which is my next favorite place after the yoga studio, and I started to read books about this stuff. And I came across a book that said that it's this work is very very special and it requires a certain amount of energetic hygiene, which I had no idea of how to do at the time. And if you're irresponsible with it, you might just open up to too much information. And so I think that I just kind of wrote off channeling at that stage. I read that in the opening parts of the book and I said, okay, this is not for me. It's too much. This is too rah-rah. You know, I'm not gonna go down that path. And it started with me starting to in 2010. A friend's mother gave me a book on the shift on 2012. And I was young and I was quite enamored by the light body and the photon belt and all of that information. But largely, I didn't know how to go about it. I was still figuring out my own journey. I was still starting to teach yoga at the time. And so I kind of forgot all about it. But one thing is for sure, if I like a book, I like the sound of a book, even if I don't finish reading it and I read it in like bursts and spurts, I'm like a hoarder of books. So I had this book called The Shift. And last couple of years ago, I got reintroduced to the energy of Meher Baba. So I first met Meher Baba again when my friend passed away. I found out about the Samadhi in Ahmednagar and blah, blah. And then I kind of found out about Meher Baba again. And I realized that a lot of the Baba lovers, because they don't call them followers, talk to Baba. They ask him for help and they say, show me this or give me that or teach me this or whatever else. And I personally didn't have that kind of a connect with the energy of Meher Baba per se. But I knew that there was a master for me out there because I was always seeking a spiritual teacher and I was not finding it. And I kept getting led by my earth teachers to meditate. From the very first teacher I got, I mean, all my teachers were authentic teachers. They were not, cool teachers. And I was never drawn to those kind of people. So I continued on my path of Chinese medicine, tapping. Like I was just moving with affirmations and energetics because that's where I was going. And sometime 3 years ago, 2, 3 years ago, I started to find out about the fifth dimension. So I pulled out that book from 2012 and the other book Shift, and I was like, oh my God, it's happening now. Like I lost a few years in the middle, like running a business, I lost track of it. And I was like, this is what I'm meant to do. And I went and I had a hypnotherapy session with a lady because I was convinced I was a light worker, but I couldn't even say this to my friends and family. They'd be like, what? But I had this deep yearning where like the only joy I got was when I was in a healing space or when I was doing this kind of work. And the yoga was not cutting it for me anymore anyway. So I knew that there was something greater coming. And I didn't actually see any past lives of my own, but I saw myself as a green light beam. And I asked that woman when I got out, I was like, so I don't know if I'm a light worker. She's like, lady, you saw yourself as a green light beam, like you're a light worker. I know, because I've seen myself as a blue light. And I know this is all sounding a little insane, but from there, I kind of met my master in a higher dimensional space who connects with me on earth. It's a meditative state in which you receive downloads. It took me a long time, and I think even now, sometimes my master will give me some information and I'll try to collate it on the internet just because I'm like, how's this coming through me? You know? But then once that happened and I was in this practice and really enjoying that process, um, I found this woman who was teaching Akashic Record readings. I had no idea about Akashic Records. I just found this woman talking about 5D, and on her website, I left my email. Shortly after I met my master, I got an email, Akashic Records level 1 and 2. And I'm like, whoa, maybe I should do it. And so I did level 1. And at that point, you're auto writing. So there's no way. It just, I think I was ready. I had no expectations and I started. And now in Akashic Record readings, I talk. And I'm surprised because I'm like, how do I know all this about you? You know? But it's your guides. So in Reiki, we learn about spirit guides. So I was, before my master and all of this, I was already talking to my guides out loud, being like, help me have a good day. I need this. Like sometimes I would say stuff like, I really need this to happen. Can you please hook it up? Like I would talk to them like I talk to anybody, you know, because one thing you realize when you move into higher vibrational work is that this whole rules of earth, you know, of like, you must practice in the morning and you must straight goes out of the window. My master's always like, don't sit for too long, sit as long as you can be comfortable. You want to be have your spine straight, but not too straight, you know. Relax as much as you can. They often remind me to have fun. You know, you realize that the meaning of love as a vibration when you work with higher dimensional beings, which doesn't come from any guru or not, because there's a lot of this whole discipline and surrender to your guru and all of this stuff, which I think is doesn't ha- is too 3D. To become fifth dimensional, you got to drop all this extra jazz. Like, in fact, funnily enough, Meher Baba used to say, so Meher Baba's samadhi is in a drought-struck place. And he said that in summers it's super hot there. He said you don't need to shower to come for the arti because this is just a practice that, you know, Hindus were taught that you subah uth ke snan karke then you go to pray. You know, he said drop all this extra jargon. You connect here, and your connection as deep as you can go and as deep as your intention is, and it's really that simple, you know. So I think that now all of my effort is to teach people to move into a fifth dimensional space, which, to put it simply, is a love based vibration. And yes, I do the meditations, I do the other stuff, but I never leave this part out because that's my mission on earth. Of course, I have all these means to get there. I find the Akashic Record reading so potent because people will come in for something else, and the guides will tell them stuff that I could have never imagined, and in the most loving way. You know, I feel like as a sensitive child myself, I struggled with authority big time. If someone told me that I have to follow this path, da da da, I was like, run away, just no interest, you know. And that's why I feel like I think I had this mission on earth. Also, to understand, our souls choose the mission. So not everybody's soul has that mission. And whenever I talk to one of my teachers about this, he always tells me that, you know, all of this that's happening to you is not happening to you. An aspect of yourself is choosing this from a perspective of free will, which is what we all have on earth. Each being has free will. So you might ask then that why can't our guides and why can't our spirit guides and our angels help us? They can, but they can only help you if you ask them to. And we forget to ask, you know. We think that our problems are so trivial. Because Earth has a law of non-interference, higher beings cannot interfere with beings on Earth. It's just the setup. We have free will, we have choices. It changes your perspective on karma as well. Because then no longer is karma you're being punished. Because which loving God will want to punish you? It's just a choice you made based on seeing yourself from a lower vibration, seeing yourself as unworthy of love. So someone treated you badly. I mean, it's tricky because sometimes clients are like, so then what about rape? You know, did this person ask for rape? And I have to then say that at some level, that soul may have chosen that experience to evolve through it and to push through the lesson of that, no matter how painful, um, so that they could then become a pioneer and inspire other people. So that suffering hasn't gone to vain. It's not gone to waste, and it's so beautifully interconnected. And this stuff just, I mean, I'm a nerd for this kind of stuff. So I know I'm kind of jumping here, but just to put in perspective, you can have the intention to channel. You may have the intention to meet your master and never channel for other people. For me, it was like that initially. I just wanted to learn for myself. And I still don't do many group channelings. I, in fact, sit only privately with my master and I'm like, what should I teach these people? And then they give me something. Only when I ask. You know what I mean? Like, when you ask, they give you. Otherwise, they give me a lot of guidance for myself, or they teach me stuff that can give me perspective on other things. So I just feel like all our problems as a coach, I see, stem from belief systems programming. I must have a child by 30. I must get married by X age. I must do this. I must make this much money. And that's the real cause of all our suffering. And when you work with higher dimensional beings, or you work with your own fifth dimensional self, essentially, um, you drop all that, you know. Easier said than done, but you drop it momentarily, and then those moments add on to, become more and more and more, and then finally start living from that place.
Can you expand on the fifth dimension, that how can one get there? And also then from there on, like, more on Akashic records, how do they work? How, the whole.
Absolutely. Um, so the shift that I was talking about earlier, the fifth dimension is, there are actually several dimensions in our universe. Like, for example, our spirit guides are in the 10th dimension. The Akashic records are the 11th dimension. We are living on the third dimension at the moment. And Earth, living being Gaia, is also has at a level decided to move into the fifth dimension. Now, people are always like, but what about the fourth dimension? The fourth dimension is just a transitory dimension, because the three dimensions are length, breadth, width, right? You know this as an architect. And the fourth dimension is time. So right now we are essentially in this 4D tunnel, right? Where time is moldable, where you can essentially say, that's why people are able to make such big changes in their lives that they thought they would do in 10 years in these 6 months of the pandemic, right? Like, you must have thought, I'm going to move to Goa like when I'm 30 something, and like, it's happened. You got a chance and it happened, right? So the fifth dimension is one in which we don't lose time per se. I mean, I don't know it all. From what I understand from my humble self, you move into a vibration of more love, because in the third dimension there's polarity, which means there's day and night, there's anger and sadness, and it's through one that you learn about the other, right? It's only because you feel hot when you get a breeze on your face, you feel that, right? If you didn't feel hot, you would not appreciate the breeze. And everything works in that fashion. I mean, essentially, the masculine energy and the feminine energy are two parts of universal existence. So in the fifth dimension, we become more love-based, and we kind of drop some of these barriers, limitations that we experience. Now, every 26,000 years, there's an opportunity for this to happen. And we are in that frame of 10 years, 11 years right now. So by 2032, we really start to see things move into that space. Now, that's not going to mean that we don't have bodies and we just float around like spirits. It just means that we act from a place of unity. So it's not a man eats man world. It's like, I'm happy, I'm prospering, I want you to prosper too. You start moving into that space. You don't look at someone doing well and be like, either feel bad about yourself or dislike them. You know, you don't have those kind of emotions. For us to step into that completely divine version of ourselves, we have to be able to experience all of the emotions, play both roles, the one of the one that's suffering and the one that's, inflicting the suffering, right? We play both the roles. So we get the perspective, and then we come to a place of being able to hold that love for everybody. And right now, you will find that in some moments, you just have these aha moments full of compassion, and you're like, I'll just forgive that person and move on. And then, of course, 3 weeks later, they piss you off again. You'll feel triggered and you'll be like, man. And then you'll cool off. A few days later, you'll be like, doesn't feel good on you to hold this grudge towards them, you know? And that's us evolving. If you think about it from a perspective of even 200 years ago, 100 years ago, and you look at what was happening on Earth, there were wars. There's still a lot of hate about who needs to be powerful and all that stuff. But it's the disparity of the two is so obvious because it's only through the crazy stuff can we be like, I don't want this anymore, right? And that's why astrologically, this is the year of the breakdown of all the structures, right? I mean, now whenever I talk to other friends who are couples who are planning children, I'm always like, I want to put my kid in a school that's a school that doesn't have exams and blah, blah, blah. And then they're like, how does it even matter anymore? Because your kid is studying from home. Like, like it doesn't matter if your kid goes to that prestigious school because I have some clients who are moms and they're like, I have to apply for my kid to get a seat in that school like when I'm pregnant. And I'm like, isn't that insane? That you just cannot live in the moment. So I think that we are seeing a lot of good happen in the world. And if you look through just basic lens, you'll feel like, no, I don't believe it. Like, how can it be happening? But every time you're judging that person for choosing a lower vibration, you're falling into a low vibration. So every time they are following that low vibration, you have to be like, I hope they can figure this out. I hope they wake into their own, higher vibrational self, or I hope they wake into their own divinity. And really that's how we step into a place of so I say self-love because that is one of the ways to get into these spaces. But self-love is also loving yourself through a lot of the crap, a lot of the aspects of you that are like silly. Like for instance, for me to bring up that whole like flipped camera version, right? You have to accept that. You can't come to a place and be like, oh my God, why am I still doing this? I thought I was evolving, right? So that's why the journey is so beautiful, at the same time so humbling, because it's not about being better than anyone or getting ahead of the curve in any way, like we do in every other facet of our lives. It's because the moment you think that you've come ahead of it, you're either going to have a lesson or you're going to have another moment and another test and another experience to be humbled again. So that's 5D. Earth is deciding to go there. We beings of Earth are potentially deciding to go there. It is believed that if you've taken birth on Earth at this time, then you definitely at a soul level have chosen to be a part of this great shift. Which is why I'm seeing that there is slow but sure interest on this topic. By that I mean that people from my life who I knew for the last 15, 20 years, even if they are spiritual people who breathe, meditate, chant, etc., and they are not looking for the dimensional shift because they're still looking at these practices to help their physical life. There are strangers across the internet and people who are curious about this. And as we've discussed, in your own perfect divine time, you'll reach a point where you will feel like, something is less important for this is more important. And as a light worker, what we do is we really help people who are waking up to this and ease their journey through it, because it is a lonely place. When in the rest of the world, people are, getting plastic surgery. And here we are telling you, you need to learn to love the aspect of yourself that's judging that nose of yours. It's completely contrary to the work that's around us. But if you start looking, you'll find magic everywhere. That's how I feel. I mean, I went to a tiger reserve and I was joking with my friends, and I was like, we are going to hold intentions in a way that we will see a tiger, but if we don't, we will not be disappointed. And out of like 4 out of 5 safaris, we saw multiple tigers. So I just feel like in that moment, these 3 other people with me, my husband and this couple, were willing to step into this collective energy, which is what happens in the group classes, which is what we are falling into now as we speak. And that is so beautiful. So I truly believe that if all the people of my previous life, or rather my social life, got this stuff, it would not be I would not be exploring. So under all the struggle or all of the moments where you feel lonely or you feel like, what is the purpose of this life? You will find that there is something. And each one of us comes here with a purpose. Your purpose as a light worker may be that you may be connecting other people, right? Some light workers do healing work. Some light workers don't do healing work. They just literally, they're the people who hold light and spread their light into the world just by like meditating in a cave. No one even knows about them, you know. That's what a light worker does. They hold light and they spread that light. So that's what you're doing through the Heart Collective, right? Essentially. So it's not that rah, it's just that if you have that feeling that I have a purpose, I'm drawn to this, I want to help people, you feel joy out of that, you're doing service, and that's it. Some people do service through never opening a spiritual text, never listening to a mantra, never meditating, but carrying, Pali Ji biscuits in their car at all times and giving it to every person who comes knocking at their window, at traffic lights and things. So, I mean, I met this fantastic human being in Taruba where I was. He's a guy who has cerebral palsy, and he fell in love with a 5-second sighting of a tiger. And now he's figured out that for tiger conservation, there has to be like this kind of understanding between the villagers and the tigers so that they can coexist happily. So he's helping tigers get water so the tigers don't come into the villages. He's helping farmers get solar lighting so they are also happy. And I looked at him and I met him and I was like, this is a light worker who's decided to like dedicate his life to living alone in Taruba and like basically taking care of these big cats, like training guides. Um, you know, he's helped people set up an agarbatti factory for livelihood in these villages, and it's just all happening in the forest. So he's a light worker in my opinion. Like his heart and the way he spoke about the tiger and wanting to save the tiger, he was like, I left when he had seen his first tiger and he had this stir. He was like, I left and I came back to the city and I was heartless and soulless. Like that's how I felt sitting in office, wanting to do something greater with my time and my energy. So um, I just want people to realize that this stuff is everybody has access to it, and everybody who's on earth has some role in the larger scheme of things to doing this. I mean, the villains in our lives have a very big role because without them, we would never grow. We would never, never, never grow. I mean, when I look at certain quotes online, or if I write a quote and I want to understand the antidote of it, I think about the person who pisses me off the most. But I'm like, if I didn't have that person to understand this quote, I would never like I would not have the ability to hit the positive side of it. It's through them that I learned this. So it changes your perspective. And I think in day-to-day living, it's harder if you are on the go and you're not resting and you're living in this crazy pace. Processing the stuff becomes harder. And that's what's bringing people to the mat, to meditation, is that I'm anxious, I'm defeated, I've had a heartbreak, I've lost my job. But then they realize that there's an ocean to uncover underneath them. And 5D is just the beginning of, of the of the pot. It's such exciting times. I mean, imagine being able to see that there's no black magic. Like, take any thing you had learned spiritually. See, our parents' spiritual practices are very fear based. I must pray at this time. Like, God is going to punish you if you don't pray at that time. Like, we behave like that, right? On Sundays, I mean, I'm half Sardani too. You have to go to the Gurdwara. Like, that used to throw me off. I was like, what if I want to go in the middle of the night? I don't want to go now, you know. And I think that these are the things that took people away from being able to connect to whatever form of source. And today, we new age teachers are making this practice more accessible because that's 5D. Having to feel like you need to do things with a specific rhythm is too 3D. It's not going to work anymore. These rules were set thousands of years ago when those religions were formed. They were relevant then. They just aren't now.
So personally for you, is there no particular routine, or you don't believe in following a practice at a certain time, or?
So I used to, and I do have a structure. I need a structure being someone who's Vata. But I've realized that when I have too much structure, I just don't enjoy my life. I'm like, I had a structure of like waking up in the morning, and not using my phone for some time, like either meditating, or doing my Reiki. This is like through the entire lockdown, I was doing this. And then basically my workout, not all days of the week, but 3 or 4 times a week, and then start my first session. And I found that first session, then lunch, and I mean, we're all sitting and working from home. So you serve yourself lunch, you cook lunch, you do the dishes. Again, you have another session, and then you have another session, and then you quickly to record some content. I was like, this is not life and joy of being, every second of my life being accounted for. And I realized that structure is good, but too much structure can just suck the joy out of your experience. So now I kind of like to feel into places. And if I don't have a perfectly structured day, on some days I enjoy it because that's a rarity for me. With work, everybody has some structure, but the days that I can just nap in the daytime, or just do what I want to do in that and honor my feeling state in that moment without that noise of you're lazy or you're not doing enough, and look at that person, how do they have more hours in their day? Like, dropping that voice in your head is a shadow I discovered in the lockdown. I think being a kid that was hyperactive, was not academically inclined, was more into performing arts, that's me personally. uh, I still carried the imprint of my mother's voice in the back of my head saying that if you don't do this, you're not successful, you're not being um, you're not achieving enough, you're not being as effective with your time. And I started to realize that this is the part of me that's making me not enjoy the stuff that I love doing. I love working as a coach. And then when I have this crazy structure, I'm like waiting for the day to end. And it's not about being in the wrong job, it's about the wrong attitude towards the right job. So I feel like I do have a structure, definitely. I mean, I try to go to bed at a certain time, wake up at the same time. But this year, I've really learned to be like, try and find freedom. Like, cancel that class if you can't make it. It's okay. And I've had to do that as an experience to really love those parts of myself. Like, when you're feeling tired and you can't take a call, and you're like, I'm so sorry, like, I can't. I'm like, sometimes I'm like, why did we ever apologize for not feeling 100%? We should be like, I think I'll do a better job if I'm in a better state of mind without having to apologize for it, right? So I think that this is the stuff we're learning about ourselves individually that will eventually make us more tolerant of ourselves and other people. And then finally, we can all become our fifth dimensional selves.
That will be amazing. Lamya, you have to tell us more about Akashic Records,
Yeah.
and
So
how they're.
the Akashic records are energy of. So if you understand that everything is energetic in this world, I mean, this table, this chair, me, you, we're all made of energy. Even the table has some amount of consciousness. Our homes have some amount of consciousness. It's just that vibration is much slower than ours. So now, come from third dimension, move into the 11th dimension. You can understand how fine and how refined energy is. Just to give you a perspective on this, imagine a bicycle. Okay, when the bicycle is moving slowly, you can see all the spikes, right? When the bicycle starts to move fast, you can't see it. That's energy. That's higher vibration, right? So um, the Akashic records are essentially a living field of energy. It's not a book. It's an energy, like a energy of, let's, how do I put it better? It's a bunch of imprints that records every single thought, word, action, aspiration that we have about the present, towards the past, towards a person, and towards your future is constantly being recorded in that. When we open someone's Akashic records, which means that if I open your records, your guides and masters, teachers, angels, without giving me their identity, will will talk to you, and you can ask specific questions to which you will get answers, and you will always be blown, because you'll be like, how does she know this is impossible. And because it's coming from you, I'm opening your Akashic records, you'll always feel like, this is the stuff I was thinking, this is what I've been wanting to do, because it's not coming from my records or someone else's records. It's coming from it. That's why the Akashic record sessions are called sessions of soul growth, because as you follow through the guidance of your record keepers and guides, um, you essentially change your karma. Because let's say that you've always had the inclination of working with girls and doing empowerment for women, for young girls, but you've always felt like, man, I've got to run a home. um, Both me and my husband are bread earners, we contribute to the house, I'll never be able to do this because it'll never pay me well enough. And in an Akashic record reading, the guides come and say, and you say, what is my purpose? What may I know about my purpose or my mission on earth? Because you can ask those kind of questions. And they say, working with women. And you'll be like, I've always felt like doing it. And now, and and honestly, if you ask them, how may I do it? They'll tell you that it could start with just mentoring one child. Because we think that if we have a mission, we have to be able to do it the best and in a way that is like so amazing that we shock the whole world. But that is doing it from a perspective of getting external validation. Your quiet work that you do in service. A yoga teacher of mine had told me this early on when I started teaching. He said, when you're teaching a class, you're doing your sadhana, you're doing your service, you're doing your karma. It doesn't matter if 2 people come to class or 12 people come to class. You teach with the same gusto, and that has stayed with me through everything I do, because I really feel like, in this world at least, yes, you can inspire hundreds of lives. But just because you're only inspiring 10, that doesn't mean you're not doing your mission. Because those 10 are going to then go and tell 10 more or 20 more, and then those 20 will tell. And somehow you will still create that web of connection and do your purpose, do your dharma on earth. So that's why I find the Akashic record readings very, very healing. And because we are constantly in flux, you may ask the same question 2 months later. People come to me monthly for a reading now. Some people, because they just feel like, okay, now I've done some of this, could use some more guidance. And they love it when you come back. They're happy to repeat things to you. They don't feel that, I've told you once and you're not listening to me. I mean, high vibration beings never give you that energy. They're just so full of love, that you'll just be shocked at how patiently they'll explain things to you. And also, I think it changed my perspective, opening so many people's records on suffering on earth. Because you recognize that if a person has a money issue, they most likely have a pattern where they can't speak up or ask for money. Or if someone has, let's say, an issue with their career, it's because they have never been able to ask themselves what they want to do. They've always tried to do the career that their parents chalked out for them. So you see the interplay between what the issue on hand is and what the inherent pattern that you have to overcome in this lifetime is, be completely interlinked. And of course, there are layers to that too. But or if you have someone coming with romantic relationship issues, you will see that they've always had self-worth issues. So you start to see a link. So you start to realize that no one is being put on earth to really suffer and like have to this horrible life or anything. It's like you come here to overcome those lower vibrational aspects of you, and you'll do it sometimes. It won't be as effective sometimes. You figured it out. But it's only when you don't recognize that something in you has to change that the negative stuff, I don't like to say negative because in 5D there's no negative. There's just outdated situations. But for perspective's sake, I feel like you start to realize that all of those things are essentially aiding you. As I said, that villain in your life is aiding you. Even when I find that I hit some points when I'm like, completely tired, demotivated, I'm like, what is this teaching you? That you need to rest more. You need to slow down. Like this is a self-imposed, I must achieve this much that you've put on yourself. Or if I feel, I mean, just to let you know, I feel like as we come to a place where you are more in tune with your own patterns, you stop feeling like the world is attacking you. You always see it as, what can I learn from this? Oh, I tend to do this all the time. Great, I need to work on this aspect. And it's only when you befriend those shadow aspects of yourself, you befriend your inner child, which is the work I do as a coach, do these patterns stop repeating in your life?
I'm definitely reaching out to you for an Akashic record reading.
Please
That
come, please. I would
yes,
love to.
Can I ask one question here?
Yes.
Lamya, you seem to have done you studied different forms of yoga, you're doing life coaching, you're into Akashic record keeping or reading. So is there a lot of similarity between all of these avenues, or are they all very different and distinct from each other? And does Akashic record have a practice of self-teaching? Do you have a practice when you're learning Akashic records?
So, honestly, the Akashic record readings is not something that you can self-teach, because just like Reiki, it has an initiation that you have to go through. Having said that, I just feel like, as I said, guys, I don't think I had any expectations of myself with this stuff. It's just a place where I can explore, and I love it because it's the one place I don't have to live by, must finish this by this time or must achieve this degree. Like, it's a place where I can flow. So you can open your own records, you can learn to do that as well, but you have to be, as I said, very careful of your energetic boundaries, which means that you cannot drink alcohol. You got to be careful of the kind of diet, this kind of stuff you consume, because you want to keep your vibration more or less high, right? So I would say that the same goes for yoga essentially, right? You cannot, but young people, they'll have a night out and they'll want to come and sweat on the mat in the morning, because this is, new age living or like modern living, which is so counterintuitive. So I think that what I would say is a similarity between all of these practices, where be it Reiki, be it the Akashic record readings, or even yoga, it's that it taught me to actually, simplify my life, and not simplify in the way that I do less, but of course, do less is one of them. Not only do less, but also, you reduce stimulation. And I think that's a really tough one personally for me, because on my Instagram as well, I find that I struggle because I'm overly stimulated when I'm plugged in gadgets and things like that. That stuff essentially absorbs, takes away your vital prana energy, electromagnetic frequency coming out of your phones and laptops. So I would say that's like one similarity I see in all practices. But otherwise, it's each person will get something different from the practice. So asana definitely helped me get more disciplined, but I realized that that discipline was not serving me beyond a point. It was keeping me more trapped in my thoughts and more in self-judgment than giving me a sense of freedom. And even the goal of yoga, eventually, 8 limbs, it's bliss. So I'd rather wake up at, like, instead of 4 in the morning, I wake up at like 7 and play my Hanuman Chalisa and still feel the feeling of yoga, than, have to have that. And this is my take on it. Traditional yogis, I think, may differ because they prefer to actually have that structure. And this is a practice and you have that sadhana. And I did that too. I just feel like, to me, it's seeming like it's outdated now. It's an old kind of paradigm and a program that shouldn't run anymore.
That's the beauty of us speaking to so many people. Like, we learn these different perspectives, and I feel like we're able to just open up our minds in this way and, like, form our own way of life and what works for us. So yeah, so that was really interesting. I feel like we're running out of time a little bit. You might have other engagements, so I don't want to keep you, on for much longer. But the topic that I would really want us to cover was the Jnana Yoga.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
basically, it is when you study scripture. So when you study the Upanishads, or you study even the Yoga Sutras, just get a basic book of the Yoga Sutras, and you'll understand, like, you know, so relatable. Everything has connection. So I actually currently don't study much of it from a yoga perspective anymore. I wish I could. If I had time, I would. Because I'm constantly studying something or the other. For instance, currently I'm reading a book again, rereading a book called Loving What Is. And it's a great book in the sense that it asks you, I don't want to give it away here, because it asks you like to ask 4 questions to any situation in your life, and it all leads you back to you. So at that level of consciousness, and people are still learning to accept that I'm part of the problem, some of these books are great. And I love getting new tools, even for my clients, because you like, our life is like an onion, like our lifetime is like an onion. You'll do some work, you'll hit one layer, you'll peel that layer off. Then again, you'll be going through life with ease, and then you'll hit another layer of yourself only. And then you'll have to shed that next layer. So I find that when I studied I think it was the Amrita Bindu Upanishad, it was beautiful. The way it explained to me what a soul is, and how to understand the soul. I mean, you would never get that in no asana class. So it was a retreat I went on, which was only about studying the scriptures, and you did only asana to like stretch out your legs because you're sitting all day. Like, it was not from a practice to sweat or any of that. Um, so now what I study is a little bit different, because I'm studying more from a universal perspective than just from the yoga perspective. But I mean, any of these, even to understand duality, if you go into the yoga um, background of understanding it, you'll find so much. So I think that that's not everyone's interest, however. But just even if you do a simple Google search on chakras, let's say that, right? You are still studying. So that's the element, that's that one path. Because when you study it, you imbibe it and you know it, right? So, and then you experience it. Just as a contrast to, maybe karma yoga, where you just go into complete giving, or bhakti yoga, where you go into complete devotion, or, Raj yoga is, I mean, I have had moments where I'm practicing yoga and I have just hit a beautiful space internally. I've sweated, I've done a back bend, I've come forward, I'm in a forward bend, or I'm in a shoulder stand. I am like feeling blissed out. It's the same feeling. They're just different paths to the same union with yourself. But I found that in yoga, I was experiencing it less and less, because now every time I was practicing, it was like practicing to teach. It had taken away the joy from the practice for me. And now, since I'm not teaching as much asana yoga anymore, I'm really enjoying just practicing for myself, without trying to perfect it for the class in the evening, or without trying to, get a good video of it, like taking that stuff out of the spectrum.
Right. So now I know you have a program called the Luminous Life, if I'm
Yeah.
not wrong.
So I have a program called Luminous You, which is a 4-session program. And I also have a yoga program called Fuel and Flow. My website should be live next month. I do weekly sessions on Thursdays that are called Luminous Live sessions, in which we will, if it's a new moon, address the new moon. If it's a full moon, address the full moon. And if there's anything else I need to teach you about fifth dimensional stuff, it's that stuff too. So I have a really sweet community of people who are experiencing this. And I think everybody is ascending into higher dimensions at their own pace, at the level at which they are peeling the onions of their life, So it's a great community. And if you want to learn more about this stuff, come to these classes. It may seem like jargon. I mean, the first class everyone comes to, there is like, what is this exactly? And then you start to piece it in together. And also, I have been told, and rather my master also tells me this, that, we don't want you to be spoon-fed. We don't want you to spoon-feed people. We want you to allow people to explore and discover it. Not only because people will value it then more, it's also because they will have their own individual experience, which is priceless. It's incomparable to anything else. Your own personal experience will always be the most potent. And then it doesn't matter if other people believe you or not, or if they have the same perspective or not, because it's so real for you, you know. Um, and that love and that feeling is real for you. It's a personal space.
Okay, this has been really nice, Lamia. Thank you so much for taking out this time. But I know there were some practices that you said you would share with us. So can we do some of that?
So, a couple of practices that I might go to. So every time I'm feeling like my too many tabs open, like I have that middle of the day, I'm suddenly like, haven't replied to those emails, haven't done this, haven't scheduled that client, haven't sent them this meditation audio, blah blah, and amidst other things like household stuff. I just stop. I place one hand, it can be any hand, on my forehead and one just below my navel. So on the hara, on the second chakra, feet flat to the earth. And just allow yourself to breathe into both the hands. Close your eyes and just breathe there. Try and take slow, deep breaths. And then you can slowly blink your eyes open and bring your palms back down. So simple, and it just kind of, even I'm feeling like more aligned. I was quite excited chatting with you all, and I'm like just feeling more aligned myself now. So I call this my, it's coming more from my Chinese medicine work that I've done. It's like my landing spot. It's like I call it my arrival, so I can just be there. And I think the fact that you place your hand on your head, you're aware of the thoughts that are coming in there. And you can do this for as long as you want. It's just a very grounding practice. Um, one of my favorites. I like to keep the practices that are go to, like when you need to do them in the middle of the day, as simple as possible, because the more complicated they are, the less likely you are to do them, you know, realistically speaking. And the next one is to just place your hands over your heart. So I like to have, I don't cross it. I actually like to have it like this because that's how I place it for Reiki. And then just to tune into your own vibration. Just sense the vibration and the energy of your heart starting to extend all around you. Literally extending from the center all the way around, behind, and forward outside of you. And then you can slowly blink your eyes open, bring your palms down. So I place it over the heart chakra, not so much towards the heart, but just over the heart chakra. And the third one I can't demonstrate, but it's coming from yoga, considering I talk so much about it today. And this is my go-to as well, is legs up on the wall. So essentially, I'm just going to demonstrate it with my phone and my remote here. This is the wall, this is the floor, and you basically have your legs up. You can take a blanket or a towel and fold it firm, about that wide, just as wide as your hips. Place it in contact with the wall. Take your legs up and lie down and play some music and just allow all of the mind's activity to move into the heart space. I mean, that is my go-to practice. And how? I mean, I can't always do it with a full stomach, but you know, for women with even their on days of their menstruation, on with cramps, with just feeling like super. I mean, I'm Vata, super airy energy, always connected to Father Sky. I need to land on the earth constantly. So for me, that practice really, really works to just help me just slow down. And I'm finding that these slow movements have a potency of their own. I mean, you'll have a new experience doing a simple practice like this each time. And that's the beauty of it. Much like anything else, much like a warrior, every time you come into it, feels different, a little different. So these are my 3 favorite practices to share with the Heart Collective. And I just love what you ladies are doing with this. I think there's such a strong need for it. And also to make spirituality less daunting, more fun. And I always joke people, they're like, I'm not spiritual, but I want to learn to meditate. I'm like, if you have a spirit, you're spiritual. It's very simple. You can't escape it. But yeah, so thank you for this. And
Thank you so much for taking out the time, for sharing with us. This has been incredible. We've learned so much. I'm so excited to be able to share this further.
I'm so excited that you guys are doing this. So please keep up the good work. And I really, really put the intention that your community really enjoys this content and more of the content that you do and continue to do.
Thank you.
See you, ladies. Have a
Thank
good
you.
one.